Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our latest webinar on giving Bad MDF the Boot in 2016. I'm Peter Hornberger, and I'm joined today by Stephen Kellum.
Good morning, everybody.
We've got some great content for you today. We're going to start with key channel trends around MDF, what's really driving this discussion about bad MDF. Then we have 8 core points. That's where we're going to spend the most of our time talking to you about, hey, these are the things you should look at when trying to avoid bad MDF in 2016. Lastly, we're going to wrap up with a couple discussion points around ROI and what we've seen winners doing over the past year. With that, Stephen's going to take it away and talk about key channel trends.
Okay, Peter. I'll take us through 4 of these pretty quickly. 2 of them really on the partner side and 2 on the vendor side. On the partner side, I think it starts with the historical frustrations that partners have had. And this is nothing new to everyone on the call today. Red tape, last-minute windfalls, constant changes, random rebates, painful audits. We've all heard this before, and I think in many, many instances, these are being addressed on a regular basis. These issues surely come up on any of the surveys that we do, and I'm sure they come up on the surveys that you do. So this is a constant work in progress. I think what's really interesting today, and one of the filters we want to look at in giving Bad MDF the Boot, is what is being added on top of that in today's partner world. And the reality is that is going to be dealing with the new buyer's journey. And that new buyer's journey is completely changing how the resellers, buyers are looking at them. There's a really interesting video out there called Zero Moment of Truth. It's a series that Google put out on YouTube. I really recommend that people take a look at it. And it walks through very nicely how impactful that change in the buyer's journey is on our partners. And the fact that, between 60 and 80%, depending on what the products are, of the buyer's journey has taken place before the end user reaches out to a salesperson. Just incredibly impactful, and in a lot of places, it's just turning partners' worlds upside down. Okay. And then on the vendor side, there's a couple. One is we just see this big movement to true MDF, and true MDF being proposal-based, 100% discretionary, and the movement away from entitlement, co-op, contractual obligations. So this is a big shift, and we see it done in a lot of different ways. We've seen some of our clients move from 0 to 60 where they move everything over. We've seen some of our clients that maybe were 90-10 co-op to MDF move to 50-50, 60-40, and then with the goal to move even further. So an awful lot of movement there, and I think for the right reasons. The investment in MDF with the partners needs to be around growth, and it needs to be with partners who are going to take advantage of that. And the other one that we see accelerating is this target on the back of marketers to deliver ROI. Now, we have to determine what that ROI is, right? Traditionally, it was POS, but people can see POS. Maybe it's MQLs now, right? It's whatever works for an individual organization. But I was sitting with a VP of a Fortune 500 company fairly recently, and she said, hey, if I don't have the right measurements in place by the end of the year, I'm out of a job. And I don't think she was being melodramatic. I truly believe that vendors are under scrutiny in the marketing side like never before. The good news is there's a lot of capabilities out there and a lot of systems out there to pull things together. The challenging piece is it's still a lot of work. There's a lot of IT involvement, a lot of systems integration that have to take place. But the good news is it's out there and it's getting easier.
Great, so then let's dive into the 8 key elements. Here's a quick glance at the 8 we're going to walk through today. Stephen and I are just going to split these up and go back and forth on these. So Stephen's going to go ahead and take number 1.
Sure. And by the way, these elements that we have here, we've been doing this type of webinar for 6 years. And we've taken these elements and looked at them from a little bit of a different lens today based on those trends that we went through a couple minutes ago. So that's really what our focus is this morning. So when we're looking at program eligibility, that's a big question today. And in simplest terms is who is going to get MDF? And it's really never been more important to understand what a partner's capabilities are, to understand if we're going to give them these proposal-based dollars, and if we're banking on giving them these dollars for growth, what are the partners' capabilities? I think scorecarding, some form of scorecarding, has never been more important. We had a prospect come to us 18 months ago who said, hey, I'm moving completely from co-op all the way to MDF. And we said, oh, great, when did you scorecard all your partners? And they said, when should we start that? And our thoughts were, wow, this is going to be a challenge because you need to be able to understand what the capabilities of those partners are if you're moving to that proposal base. And it's really going to affect your entire plan because you need to be able to make them successful. And if you're moving them to MDF, but your fund utilization goes from 95% to 45%, while you've accomplished something, you've got work ahead of you to get that back up. One of the ways to look at this, there's lots of scorecarding capabilities out there. We like what Serious Decisions has done. They've got a research brief that's excellent. It'll be available, as Peter said, in the links that we have at the end of the webinar. There were 3 key points that they made here in their research brief. One was that vendors have to excel in deciding which partners get MDF and how much, and that the key for the future health of the channel, and once again getting the maximum return of the MDF, really depends on this. So in the future of the channel and getting that maximum MDF is the way we've got to look at this, because if we're not understanding what those partners' capabilities are and aligning with that, we're going to end up failing.
So number 2 is program period. This is a pretty simple one, but it's really crucial to consider in light of your organizational structure. And I would venture to guess that a lot of you put this into place, or it was in place when you came to your organization, and hasn't necessarily been revisited. Annual and quarterly MDF cadences are the most common, but you need to look at your channel and figure out, does that make sense for your partners? How does it line up with seasonality and product cycles? Or are you struggling to get enough control over your MDF program? You may want to look at dropping down the cadence to a shorter cadence to align with that. And on this next slide, we've got just a great example of seasonality laid against program period. You can see the dips based on seasonality in here. You've got these metrics. You know how your sales cycles work. So you know when your products are successful and not. Make sure you're not putting a bunch of MDF dollars into your sales cycle at a point when in the next 30, 60, or 90 days there's going to be a massive drop-off. You need to make sure that you're aligning your dollars with your peaks. And so moving to shorter programs is going to allow you to have some more flux with where the dollars are spread out over the coming year.
All right, how funds are earned. This seems really simple on the front of it, because true MDF is discretionary. The partners don't know what their balance is. However, we've seen a combination of both true discretionary and also accrual based. I think there's a couple reasons why we're seeing this. One is, if you're going to run truly discretionary, sometimes it gets a little scary for some of those smaller partners, right? All of a sudden they're looking at their MDF spend and going, wow, I have no idea what I have. They're also going, wow, this is pretty complicated. I'm not so sure how I'm going to be able to manage this. So we're seeing a combination, really. While the larger partners it makes sense for, and we're seeing the truly discretionary being used, we also see the accrual-based side of it for some smaller partners, and for perhaps even some different activities that you're trying to drive. The key consistency between both of them is they're proposal-based, and there's no contractual obligation. And even if it's accrual dollars and the partner can see a potential bucket of dollars there, through the T's and C's, there's no contractual obligation there. And if you want to look at how you stand versus the market, this is from our last survey, and you can see that 44% of the respondents said they were doing discretionary, 31% accrual-based, and only 22% were saying that they were doing contractually obligated co-op. And just a little reminder on the left-hand side why we're doing MDF and why so many people have moved to MDF is it truly is an opportunity to create growth. It's growth-oriented. A lot of times we hear it referred to as BDF, a business development fund. It definitely provides greater flexibility in not being just tied to the partner's sell-through. And I think that kind of goes back to the scorecarding side of it as well. No longer is it good enough just to look at what the sell-through is. You really need to look at the partner's capabilities in terms of what are their marketing capabilities, what are their sales capabilities, not even just what are their technical certifications anymore, to truly understand who are the stars of tomorrow and what sort of expectations we can really have on those partners. The other side of this is we're also seeing a carrot and a stick philosophy coming out quite often on this, where partners have to do certain things and have to have certain behaviors before they're even able to qualify for those marketing dollars, whether that's accrual-based or, once again, whether it's discretionary-based. So as you can see, there's obviously a pretty big trend, right? We've got 75% of respondents saying they're running MDF programs.
So the number 4 is products promoted. There's really 2 main considerations here. Which products are you focusing on within your MDF offering, and is there a need to weight those products differently? Maybe you're phasing out some old models and bringing in something new. Maybe certain products are more important, tying back to the seasonality component. Maybe certain products are more important in different seasons. Money is going to speak to your partners, and so if you push the dollars in one direction, they will naturally follow the money in that direction. So pay attention to that. And then another key consideration here is multi-vendor bundled solutions. There's a huge growth in the market, and partners are selling things in these bundled fashions, and maybe your products is one of those that does really well when bundled with something else from another vendor. Consider that, and if there's a boost in your sales cycle, if there's a boost in your close rate because of bundling, put dollars into that to encourage partners to say, hey, this is a successful way to sell our products, bundle us with X, Y, or Z, and see if you can improve their close rates as a result of that.
This is where we're really seeing a lot of change, and it's been driven by, once again, the buyer's journey. It's completely changed what partners have to do to be able to reach their potential customers, and if they're not doing that, they're not going to make the short list, and they're not even going to be able to play in the game. So when you're looking at aligning your go-to-market strategies, activities that align with your go-to-market strategies, align with their go-to-market strategies, and what behaviors you really want to reward, we're going to show you guys a little bit of data here that I think really exemplifies why this is one of the key fundamentals. So this is what your partners are facing. There's no question that the buyer's journey has shifted so much, and I'm sure everyone has heard this number, and whether it's 50% or 60% or 70% of the buyer's journey has already taken place before they reach out and speak to a salesperson. It's just a matter of what that number is. We're hearing 57% is a good number in traditional markets, and it's up to 80% in cloud. So this is a massive shift for partners who in many cases have not been really strong in digital marketing. So they have to get good at having a digital presence. They have to get good at digital marketing. And the truth of the matter is most of them aren't very good at that. So we're going to have to work together on this. As a matter of fact, one of the links that we're going to provide at the end of this is a great white paper by the IDC that talks about just how you can do that. A couple of things, they had 3 real conclusions, and one is that most partners, with the exception of the largest, have limited digital presence, and they were really talking about their websites. And then they went on to say that really creates a massive gap between the haves and the have-nots. If you can't get your brand out there, if you're not able to make that buyer smarter, you're not going to get on that short list, and you're not even going to get to play. And then how do vendors really work with those partners to bridge that gap? And in that IDC paper, there's a lot of interviews with Fortune 500 companies from the Valley that talks about how some folks like SAP and HP and VMware are doing a really good job of that. Okay. And this is all really comes down to the fact that the B2B buyer's journey has been consumerized. And to me, the 3 key pieces out of this, if you look at today's B2B buyer, is that it's a continuum relationship. It's all about the relationship, and particularly if you get into cloud. I've talked to several partners that said, hey, it's not even about the product anymore. It's about the relationship there and the ongoing relationship as well. And then the impact on B2B marketing tactics. As I said earlier, marketers have to help. Now I'm referring to partners as marketers, or us helping them, have to help those buyers be smarter. So those buyers are going to be smarter about what they're looking for, and then when they actually come in contact with our resellers, that reseller has to be smarter, right? Their salesperson can't just be a salesperson anymore. They have to have affirmation, just not information. So incredibly valuable to work with them on that. And then what MDF activities do you focus on? Well, thought leadership, right? How do we create that brand? How do we help make them successful? So this is an interesting slide. I think it asks more questions, it definitely ponders a lot of questions, but it's a broad B2B study, and it's looking at trends in the B2B space on what are B2B marketers doing even beyond tech. And the truth of the matter is, this is a great example of what's hitting our partners. If you look over on the right-hand side, effectiveness ratings for B2B tactics. So a whole lot of people are saying in-person events are highly effective. So the interesting piece for me is when you look over to the left-hand side, you've got social media content other than blogs, case studies, blogs, and then newsletters. You've got digital marketing taking those top 4 or 5 spots. So if those are the top 4 or 5 spots on what folks are doing, how come it's not manifesting itself in the top ratings for everyone for B2B tactics? And what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing is because of what the IDC is saying, partners aren't very good at this. So they're doing it. B2B marketers are going to be doing social, they're going to be doing SEM or SM or SEO, and they're going to be doing this branding, but a lot of them aren't very good at it. So a great opportunity for vendors to focus on those activities and really help those partners. Okay. And CCI top activities really bear this out. The largest jump year over year that we saw was from internet ad presence, went from 9% to 13%. So we are seeing our customers going through exactly what the IDC is talking about and exactly what Sirius is talking about, what everybody's talking about, is that change in that buyer's journey, and those activities are shifting. Our 2015 numbers we expect to be trending in this direction as well.
That's great. Thanks, Stephen. So number 6 then is reimbursement percentage, and this is all about taking those activities that we just looked at and teaching your partners by prioritizing certain ones over others. Maybe you take a look at your market and realize that LinkedIn advertising is way more effective for your marketplace than any other form of advertising because you're in high tech and because all of your end customers are heavy LinkedIn users. Well, train your partner to start using LinkedIn advertising. They're probably not the best marketers and they don't know how to use that medium yet. And so train them by putting the dollars there. Say, hey, I'll give you 100% reimbursement if you do LinkedIn. I'll give you 25 or 50% for all the other traditional advertising components. Again, partners will follow the money. So if you use this as a carrot and stick, you can start to push them in a one-to-many way to start using some of those more effective marketing tactics. And then the other thing to consider is pipeline stage. We've seen a huge shift across MDF and incentives to move away from post-sale metrics. So MDF dollars, accrual-based dollars that are contractually obligated based on last year's sales, incentives, rebates that are pushing just basically a price adjustment on the back end. We've seen a shift in taking those dollars and actually putting them into the marketing activities that make up the earlier stages in the pipeline. If you have the right partners on board, and assuming that you've done your scorecarding and figured out who those are, once someone's in the pipeline and they're in conversations with them, they should be good at closing them. Where their challenges are these days is getting people into that pipeline and dealing with that 57% or that 80% part of the buyer's journey that is taking so much weight in the ultimate shortlist at the end. And so look at your pipeline, figure out how your different marketing activities align, and try to put more money into the front end to get people into that pipeline, and then rely on your partners to do the actual closing work at the back end.
And then we get to marketing execution, which ties into all of this as well. And historically, maybe we looked at, okay, does the partner branding match the branding that I'm looking for? It's so gone beyond that, right? Now it's, okay, internally, how am I going to help drive them to success? How am I going to help them with their website? How am I going to help them with their social media? How am I going to help them with case studies, with blogs? How do I help them transform their sales force from what was old school sales to now marketing/sales that is as much about affirmation as information? And so the question really is that internal or is that external? And we have clients and folks that we work with who are building these capabilities or working to build these capabilities, concierge systems and support to try to help them do it internally. We also see a tremendous rise in the use of through-partner marketing agencies and finding a third party that can do this. There's obviously a lot of benefits to this, right? You protect your brand very, very simply on that end. You make it easy for the partners to execute on marketing. I think one of the absolute keys is you provide objective, reliable marketing outcome data. And from my perspective, that's the biggest driver, because once again, it all goes back to measurement. You do all of this work to create the ability, enable partners to have the ability to go out there and execute. But if you can't tie it back in and you can't measure it, it goes back to that earlier statement where the VP of that Fortune 500 company was sitting in the room with us and said, hey, I can execute, but if I can't measure it, it's not going to do me any good. And this is the hard part, but the absolute necessary part of this. And it's interesting, this is a diagram, an infographic on CCI, and we do channel wisdom, we do software, we do services. To me, the interesting piece that fits in really well here is in integrations. And integrations, when we talk to either our clients or prospects, used to be a conversation point that was sort of left at the end. Now it's front and center, and we're having these conversations right off the bat. You know, an SSO, we don't even consider an integration anymore, right? You just for partner experience, you're going to have an SSO. A CRM, we have a CRM integration plan that's coming out of every conversation with a new client or existing client. And if it's SFDC, the question isn't, do I do a SFDC integration? It's what kind of SFDC integration do I do? Is it one directional? Is it multi-directional that really now gives you the ability to take data from CCI and say put it back into your SFDC and start to look at some real measurements? It's just not the data points, but what are you putting those data points up against? And then the third one that we have now on absolute regular basis as well is an integration with a TPMA through partner marketing agency. You know, how do we take those marketing execution activities that the partners are doing, how do we take those pre-planned campaigns, how do we take the data from that and pull it back in so that we can measure success? There's a big challenge, I understand this, in pulling in IT, and sometimes we have to run phased approaches, but great to have IT in there in the beginning, and we got to push for this to make it happen, because it's really what's going to drive the value.
Okay, number 8, the home stretch. The last point is payments, and there's two keys here. The first is pay your partners quickly. The faster you get payment into their hands, the more sticking power you have towards reinforcing whatever behavior they just accomplished. The second one is partner versus program-centric programs. You know, this is all about the exchange rate flow and who assumes that. Is it you that takes that? Is it the partner that takes that? Program-centric is still the leader in the market. It's the easiest for a finance department to forecast and to look at. But partner-centric is better for the partners. There's no flow. They don't have to worry, you know, am I going to get less? Am I going to get more? So I think this is an important one to revisit as we go into 2016. This is a hard one to overhaul and change in your organization, but you should start having those conversations now so that if the market really swings that way, you're prepared for it. But I think more importantly than that, the number one priority is paying your partners quickly. I can't stress this enough. You need to get money into your partners' hands fast. The best practice is 21 days or less. But what we're seeing with industry leaders, with those top tier clients of ours, that's creeping down to 14 days or less. And I think very quickly we're going to see a shift where the best practice overall is now 14 days. So if you're not underneath that 21, you should get there in 2016. You need to focus on that and push for that, and then start looking towards the future of even getting it farther down to that 14 days.
Yeah, it's really reinforcement, right? And you've done all these great things. Now let's reinforce this behavior and get those dollars back to the partner.
So we've got a couple points on the conclusion, then we're going to open it up for questions. So if you do have questions, there's a chat box here. You can go ahead and enter those. We'll get to those in just a moment. We've got 2 points on the conclusion. The first is around ROI, going back to that discussion that Stephen had with the VP last year about, hey, if I can't measure it by the end of this year, I'm losing my job. We've got a couple points on that first.
Actually, I had that conversation 3 weeks ago, so it's pretty fresh and it's pretty relevant in my mind. And one of the things that we've had out there for a while is the partner investment life cycle. And it comes from our conversations with our clients and with folks in the industry over the past couple of years. And basically the steps that everybody goes through with their partners and then does rinse and repeat, right? And how do we continue to make it better? And the focus on the MDF side really for us is around the joint marketing planning and approval, around the MDF fund allocation, distribution, and the marketing campaigns and execution. And that's really is the key of what we wanted to address today in the elements on how to drive a successful MDF program. The key, though, is you can't look at that in a vacuum. You've got to look at, okay, what did I do on the partner scorecard and benchmarking? What was my joint business planning like? How did I tee up my MDF for success? And then coming around the circle, getting into what are the the tan areas there, is then how do I start to measure the value of what I've done? So while our focus on those elements is in those three pieces, we think it's really, really important to be able to have a conversation as an MDF individual about where that sits in the bigger scheme of things.
And then the last point in conclusion is we wanted to talk about what we saw winners doing in 2015. I think first they focused on partners by making MDF easier, more rewarding, driving down the time to get that check into their hands, integrating it, single pane of glass. We'll talk about that one a little bit more in a moment. They focused on soft target metrics earlier in the pipeline, so moving away from those post-sale rewards, really looking at getting the right partners on board so you know they can close the deal and then helping them get things into their pipeline. They moved to integrating disparate systems. We've said this a bunch of times. We got a lengthy point on it, really getting things tied together so that you can actually look at measurement, pulling together all the disparate systems that you're engaging with your partners on and getting a singular place where you can start to pull those metrics together and look at measurement. And then lastly, they focused on also integrating for the partner's benefit, so creating a single point, whether that's the portal or a PRM where the partner can go and interact with their MDF, interact with their TPMA, interact with any incentives that are being offered. So using SSO to group all those together and even deeper dive integrations that have data pulls back and forth between them. So those are some of the things we see the winners doing. We really encourage them to take this list, look at it, how do you stack up, and see what you can do with these in 2016 and even in 2017. Look, we know it's a slow-moving process, so start to think about these things now, and hopefully you can accomplish them over the next couple of years. And so with that, again, I'll remind you, we've got the little cheat sheet with the 8 steps available for you to download. It's currently an attachment here in GoToWebinar. We've got a couple questions that we'll dive into, and then we'll go ahead and let you guys get out of here. If you do have any more questions, go ahead and enter them. I've got a couple here so far. Stephen, the first one, I think we touched on this a little bit. It says, I run an accrual-based program, predominantly accrual-based. How do I switch over to discretionary? What should be the steps? I know you talked a little bit about scorecarding your partners. I think that's step 1, but can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, and that's a process, right? What we're telling folks, and we lived through this once again with a client who had already gone down this path and came a little late to the game on doing the scorecarding. And the truth of the matter is we ended up with going from an 85% fund utilization to a 35% fund utilization when they launched. And we spent 6 months going back through their processes. And some of the things they could have done better is really digging in the scorecarding, but then digging in on getting buy-in from certain partners, finding test groups, getting case studies, getting testimonials from key partners that you can sell back through the rest of the through the partner community, and really making sure that your objectives are really well defined and communicated as to what is the value for the partners to doing this, right? And if you're going to change this one piece, it was interesting. They were changing other pieces of their program as well that were going to maybe help offset it, but they got behind on the communication side of it. So I think, figuring out exactly what the game plan is, getting buy-in from key individuals, figuring out how to document that, and then moving that back through your partner channel in conjunction with if you're going to do a rebate now, and if you're going to do a spiff as well, and what's your whole incentive program for your partners. So we walk through that with them step by step, and I'm glad to have a conversation with anybody about that.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Second question, last question we've got is, we're struggling with our partners' marketing capabilities. What do we do? And I think we touched on this a little bit throughout, shifting to the softer target metrics more in the earlier in the pipeline, using a reimbursement percentage to train them on what are the core marketing functions that they should be focusing on right now. Do you have anything else to add to that, Stephen?
Sure. I read that IDC paper. I think it's a great place to start. And then we're glad to talk about a lot of the elements that you're talking about. We've gone through with industry experts, and we've got some folks who are very good at let's just say, building concierge services that can help partners be successful. And there's a lot of vendors in the Valley who've done a really, really good job at this and who are ahead of the curve. And we can either help share some of that knowledge, connect folks with other folks out there, point some folks in the right directions. They're people who've done a really, really good job at this.
Great. I've got one more here that just came in, and Stephen, maybe you can talk to this. Is it best practice to pay partners after they submit leads? I've seen it done both ways, but if you pay partners first, you're more likely to lose tracking capabilities because you've lost leverage. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, that's a great question, and I think that kind of goes to, you know, what sort of trust that you have. I think the interesting piece on that too is trying to figure out, you know, what is that whole campaign that you're an objective you're trying to achieve on that? Is it just are they just doing one piece? Is that a piece of a bigger campaign? Say, for instance, what we see a lot of movement towards is a joint marketing planner where planning where we're taking all these activities and we're putting them together to create an ROI on a campaign. And yes, you can pay them on individual activities as they move through that, but you still have other pieces and objectives that you're looking for to see nailed down before you pay out the whole thing. And then, like I said, I think the other piece on that, it kind of goes back to a trust, and it's a give-get. Whatever you decide to do on that, you need to be clear and consistent and have good communications around that. And if you make a shift away from it, make sure that the communications around that are really clear as well.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We've got our contact info up on the screen if you want to talk any more about this. The cheat sheet's available for you now. We'll be sending out an email. We'll have that sheet in there along with a bunch of the links, the IDC, the Zero Moment of Truth video, and the Serious Brief. And I think there's a couple other things, a couple blogs that Stephen mentioned. So we'll get all those out to you in the next couple days along with the recording and the slides. And we're happy to go into more depth on any of this if it's available. And also keep your eyes out. We're going to be starting a podcast called the CCI Channel Wisdom Podcast. We're going to have some content on there that's different from what you're seeing on the webinar. So keep your eye out for that. We'll have a notification going out, but some more relevant content coming your way there as well. So thanks everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking some time. We look forward to talking with you again in the future.
Hey, thanks everybody.